Hey guys, Dan and Sally here. We are in Maui, Hawaii, and we have been just given the Canon EOS R, and we want to make clear that Canon has said this camera will be a great add-on to your existing Canon camera collection.
So because of that, it seems like there's things missing from this, depending on how you plan on using it. It's really not the all-in-one camera that we are hoping for, but we're still gonna put it to its paces, test it out, take a look at a bunch of different things. She's even gonna shoot a wedding with it in a couple weeks. So we're definitely gonna give it all that we've got and let you know, but stay tuned. We've got some awesome pictures and video from this, so be sure to check that out.
Okay guys, so we've been back home for about 6 weeks now, and we've had a chance to really use this camera and put it to the test, and in some really, good real world situations that you guys would, obviously use this camera in. Okay, so let's talk about the ergonomics first. I like that it feels more like a DSLR. Now, my other mirrorless systems are quite light, and I hear people complain that, it's just a little pocket camera, but this one feels quite nice. It's quite sturdy.
Definitely. When I first picked it up, it felt like a real camera, and that was a good thing. And then another couple things that we do have that's new is we now have a control ring on the front, which you can customize to anything that you want. And then it's actually on the front of a lens right here. And that's really nice to be able to have. You can program all kinds of stuff to that. And the customization in general is just way better than before. So pretty much every button on this you can put to whatever you want. Now, we do have USB charging on this, but I will say that you have to get a $200 proprietary charger in order to do that, so it's probably not something you're going to benefit from.
Yeah. So with the multi-function bar, obviously Canon put a lot of thought into this, and honestly, it was a great little thing to add to this camera, something different that the other cameras don't have. But I do have to say, it was quite laggy for me, as well as I just kept hitting it at the wrong time. I switched it to ISO, and it made it just, it was too slow, and my finger kept swiping across it, and it just did not work out for me. I actually ended up shutting it off and not using it at all. Now, okay, joystick. I am missing my joystick. I love that on my Sony camera and some of my other cameras for moving my focus points, but I do like that they added in the menu system that you can either switch for left or right hand. So as I'm looking through the viewfinder, I can move my finger across my screen, no lag at all, which is awesome, and change my focus point. And if you get used to that over time, honestly, it could be a lot faster than using your joystick for moving your focus points.
A couple good things is that even though we don't have a great CPA rating on the battery life was actually great. I found it to be much better than I expected. Not quite what we're getting on some of the best mirrorless cameras out there, but even though it's the same battery as the 5D4, I was actually very impressed with how it held up for mirrorless use. And then also the buffer on this, it cleared fast enough. We do have UHS 2 cards, so that is helping. It's not shooting at anything more than 5 frames per second, so it's not that difficult for it, but it was able to keep up just fine with it. And there's little things that just matter. So for example, when you take your lens off and you have a shutter that comes down over the sensor to keep it clean, that is amazing to have. Is one of the greatest features. Kudos for Canon for putting this in here. I don't know why it's not on every camera right now.
So let's talk lenses. Okay, so Canon released the 24-105 f4, the 20-70 f2, and the 50mm f1.2. Okay, these lenses, I didn't really shoot with the 24-105, it's not my jam. The 20-70, you guys, okay,
pretty awesome.
It was such a good lens.
Really cool.
Used it for all of my portraits, basically. And, I love that it goes down to f2, especially if you're wanting a zoom lens, if you're shooting weddings, if you're shooting portraits, that f2 won't make that difference of the compression in the background. The 50mm f1.2. Now, you guys, The sharpness in this lens is unbelievable. I shot this picture at f1.2 and just absolutely incredible. The eyes are perfectly in focus. Just an absolutely beautiful lens.
Yeah, I mean, these are really showing off their new lens mount. They're giving us lenses that are not being done by other brands, and that's really cool. Now, that's all we have, so you're still gonna rely on your other Canon lenses with adapters. Now, Canon has 3 adapters that they've released for this. A regular one, another one with a control wheel on it, and then a really cool one that adds, you can insert ND filters or circular polarizers in there. So another thing that's really inventive, and I will say that using Canon lenses on those, the regular EF mount lenses on those with the adapters has been great. It was like using any other Canon camera with that. And I even tested Sigma and Tamron lenses, and those worked as well. So overall, if you don't mind adapters, we have a really good complete lens system.
Okay, so let's talk about focus performance. Yeah. Now, I was using face detection in a lot of my shots, and I found that quite often it would catch on the model's hair, or it would catch on the trees behind the models as they were moving. And you know, eye autofocus, love using it. It just wasn't working, and I tend to shoot in continuous focus, and it just wasn't giving the performance that I thought it could.
Yeah, eye autofocus for right now is going to be single shooting only. That might change with an update, but that's the issue right now. Now, if you change the autofocus from focus priority over to shutter priority at 5 frames per second, I actually found that it kept up just fine with a couple moving towards me. Didn't have any issues with that, but for things that are faster moving, you're either not going to get the autofocus to work properly, or you're going to see your frame rate is going to drop into about 2 to 3 frames per second. Another massive highlight is going to be the focus coverage. I mean, literally, you can move your focus points anywhere across this frame. This is something that you just do not get on the DSLR, and the Canon EOS R is actually one of the best cameras I have ever seen for your focus coverage. Now, single point is going to work actually really good, and it focused really well even in low light. The camera is technically rated to -6 EV, which is absolutely incredible. Now, you must use their 1.2 lenses to do that. So Canon is obviously keeping the lens wide open to enable a lot of low light focusing ability. So if you have like an f4 lens, it's not going to be quite as good for that, but overall the performance on that was very good. So the only issues were with tracking. Yeah. It just doesn't keep up with the speed, and then you don't have that eye autofocus in the tracking modes. Right.
All right, let's talk a little bit about shooting with it on a wedding day. Now, at 3 frames per second, that shutter lag was killing me. And I typically shoot in focus priority mode, which means my subjects are always moving. I am constantly having them move, touch each other's face, move their hair, move forward, move backward, and that lag just about killed me each time. Now, obviously you can go up to 5 frames per second, but it's still not fast. And as well, I turned off my picture preview, and it helped a tiny bit, but it didn't help enough where I can get with my 5D4, you know, many frames per second, as well as my Sony A7III, A7R III. It just shoots very, very fast and exactly what I need. Okay, now let's get into something that means more to me than any of this. If you are shooting on a wedding day, now you can go look at this video up here, go click on it. I had a card fail on me on a wedding day, and guess what? All of those pictures were lost, but I was writing to another card at the same time, and all of my pictures were saved. If that didn't happen, who knows what have happened? You know, all those pictures from the beginning of the day would have been gone. And it's just extremely important to me. That is why I would never shoot solely on a Canon EOS R on a wedding day.
I mean, at first glance, this could be a big step up for video. We're dealing with 4K internal, we have 10-bit recording on this, we have C-Log, we have the Canon signature dual pixel autofocus system, a flip screen. So what else could you want? Well, Actually quite a bit, because a lot of those things come with some big misses. The first thing is going to be that 4K recording that is going to be limited to a 1.7x crop, which basically turns this into a smaller sensor camera than the 80D and almost like a GH5 type micro four thirds camera. And even then, I just found it lacked the detail that I'm used to with some other cameras like the GH5 and A7 III, though it's still a noticeable step up from 1080p. But even 1080p is going to be limited to just 60 frames per second, while just about every other camera out there can record up to 120p. And we also have some big missing features that made it really difficult to shoot with it, and one of them is going to be IBIS. So we do not have in-body image stabilization, which is really interesting because that's one of the big advantages to mirrorless technology, is the ability to add that on the sensor. It's available in most other cameras and it is missing in this one. And that is compounded by the fact that this camera suffers a lot from rolling shutter. You get a lot of that jello effect. So any kind of movement that you do have that's unstable is really just going to look bad and very difficult to fix in post. Now, video quality is going to be very similar to the 5D Mark IV, which is pretty good. I mean, we're seeing in low light, this thing looks good up to about 1600 ISO. At that point, it gets a little bit worse for me. I'm okay up to about 6400 and then kind of bounces out a little bit too much grain for me. Another big thing we should talk about is vlogging, because this is a very big market for a camera like this with its flip screen, and many had hoped this was going to be the ideal camera, and in many ways we do have that. The only downsides are going to be, yes, when you're going into 4K, you're not going to be able to do it because you can't get that wide angle because of that severe crop. I know plenty of people have said you can hook this to an adapter. EFS lenses will work with an adapter, which is great because they have some awesome wide angle lenses. The downside for that is that when you switch into a photo mode, you're going to have to either stay in that crop or switch lenses, which is just not ideal. And speaking of lenses, we still have nothing that's really wide angle, so you will be using third-party lenses or Canon's other EF lenses on this. And then we're still going to be limited on our slow motion to just 60 frames per second, which is a bit unfortunate. Now, for video autofocus, we are using Canon's signature dual pixel autofocus system. I have raved about this for years. It is a great focus system for video use. However, I will say it's a little bit more jumpy than I've seen in the past. And one thing that's interesting is if you're in single focus mode, you can actually adjust your focus system in how quickly it focuses between objects for things like focus pulls. However, if you're in your tracking modes, you actually can't. So what's most likely happening is Canon is speeding things up to work very quickly for photos, but the result of that is that for video autofocus, it's just not as smooth as some of their other cameras. The good thing though is that battery life has actually been a little better than expected. So while we do have quite a bit of battery drain while shooting video, it's honestly probably as good or better than Canon's 5D Mark IV.
So overall image quality, it will be similar to the Canon 5D IV, which means it's the best you can get from Canon, but it doesn't compete with some of the other newer sensors out there. And dynamic range, while better than the 6D Mark II, struggles a little bit as you push the shadows. And as you push the shadows, grain and sometimes banding definitely can quickly creep in. Now, in low light, images for me, particularly look great until about 1600 ISO. And, obviously when you're in those dark places, you can't help it. But I have a very difficult time pushing them past ISO, 3200 without feeling like I've lost too much of the image quality.
One thing I noticed pretty much right away is you're not seeing blackout when you're taking your images, and what's happening is the camera is actually showing you your last image. And so while it's technically kind of the same thing, by doing this, it really changes the perspective. It makes you feel more in tune with the picture you're taking, and rather than disconnecting you with that black screen, you're actually still able to view what you think you should be viewing inside of your viewfinder, and that's a really, really nice feature to have. So the big question is going to be, who is this camera for and who should actually go buy it? And it is a big step up from the Canon 6D, and I see it as a very compelling option for that. Canon did advertise this as kind of a camera to add to your kit. If you're already a big Canon shooter, especially if you shoot a lot of video, it might be something worth adding to your kit. But I think for most people, it's going to be a casual shooter situation where you're upgrading from like a 6D or an 80D, and it might be a decent camera for that. The problem is there were just a lot of oh no nos on this.
Yeah, let's talk about them.
I have a list called My Oh No Nos.
My oh no no number one card slot. that is a deal breaker for me. I cannot shoot a professional shoot or a wedding with a 1 card slot camera.
Yeah.
It's impossible. You heard my rant earlier. Don't do it, don't attempt it. Okay, number 2. It just didn't keep up with my 5D4. I would say that 3 frames per second is just too slow for me. And as I said, I'm shooting fast moving portraits, flow posing, and it just does not keep up. It's too slow, too much lag.
So whether or not those are deal breakers for you, I mean, let us know below what your thoughts are. We've been posting a lot of pictures with this over on our Instagram pages, so go check those out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let us know your comments below, and we'll see you real soon in the next video.